Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody here today. We are looking forward to looking into God's Word and see what He has for us today. Before we begin our class this morning, let's go to God in prayer. God, we're thankful to You for the day You've blessed us with, the time You've allowed us to assemble here to study together, study from Your Word, and to fellowship one with another. God, we ask You to be with us as we study, that we will see the truths that are here, and that there may be things that we can apply in our lives every day. God, we're especially mindful today is the day we start our vacation Bible school. God, we know that You're here and You're going to be a big part of that You will bless that effort. God, all glory goes to You in this. Be with all those who are sick, that request an interest in Your prayer, in our prayers to You. In Christ's name, amen. All right. So, how many of you are excited that today is Vacation Bible School Day? Yeah, we all are. It's going to be a big deal. If any of you have an opportunity to, you have Facebook, there's a section in there called Lowndes County Word of Mouth. And several of us have posted for Vacation Bible School in that. So take a look. If you see it, repost it. Let's flood it as much as we can. We are in chapter 23 of Genesis today. Chapter 23 is a fairly short chapter. Last week, we finished up our discussion about the sacrifice that Abraham was to make and the importance of that, and things that we can get from that. And we were introduced into some more of Abraham's family. Now, this week, I don't really know just how much time has elapsed in this, but this week, Sarah has died. Beginning with verse 1, Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Then Abraham stood up from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a foreigner and a visitor among you. Give me property for a burial place among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my lord. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold from you this burial place, that you may bury your dead. Then Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, the sons of Heth, and he spoke with them, saying, If it is your wish that I bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and speak with Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he has, which is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me at the full price, his property for a burial place among you. Now Ephron dwelt among the sons of Heth, and Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the presence of the sons of Heth, all who entered at the gate of his city, saying, No, my Lord, hear me. I give you the field and the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I give it to you. Bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed himself before the people of the land, and he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If you will give it me, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, My Lord, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? So bury your dead. And Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out the silver for Ephron, which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, currency of the merchants. So the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field, which were within all the surrounding borders, were deeded to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth, before all who went in at the gate of his city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre, that is Hebron, the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded to Abraham by the sons of Heth as property for a burial place. A lot of stuff there. So Sarah was 127 years old. How old would this make Abraham? You remember? 10 years older, about 137-ish roughly. So, all right. So Sarah died in Hebron, the land of Canaan, and then Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Now that might sound like to you that they lived in this whole nother town and all, but not exactly. The way they did that, and that particular custom is that she had a tent and she would be laid out in her tent, and Abraham would come to her tent to mourn for her. That was kind of the custom, or the custom of the day with that. Tony? Yes, Sarah was the only one that actually got that distinction. I think and this would just be my opinion, really, but I think because of who she was the first, I guess you could say. She was the patriarch's wife, Abraham's wife, and therefore I guess she had maybe a special place or something, and that. Mm-hmm. Right. And if I remember correctly, in the in Hebrews the 11th chapter, she is also mentioned along with Abraham, her husband, and that was, that was not typical, but she was mentioned, and her time was mentioned. It was kind of like we got a little bit of a sneak peek last week where the writer here actually mentioned Rebecca as a daughter of Bethuel. We're going to see that Rebecca had a brother, but he wasn't mentioned. So, and we'll probably refer back to that next week, because we're going to meet Rebecca next week. We're going to see her. So this is the next couple chapters is pretty much about the last we're going to hear of Abraham. We're going to be moving into some discussion about his son. But Abraham is, I guess you could say, coming to a conclusion. There's a couple more things that's going to happen, but so what do you think about this this buying of the property here? Well, possibly. We see where it was offered. I would be a little curious about. I'd be a little curious about the motive. Offering to give it to him. Maybe they were pure, maybe they were not pure. I don't know. I do know that the sons of Heth, and let's talk about these sons of Heth a minute. Do y'all know who they were? Do you know where they came from? They were actually descendants of Ham, descendants of Canaan, and we saw that in chapter 10, verse 15. I think where it mentioned Hittites. So these were cousins of Abraham. So they start off, these sons of Heth start off by saying to Abraham that you are a mighty prince among us. Go ahead and bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. Now, how much time did Abraham have? Not much. You are right. They did not have they were not able to run to town to the funeral home. That was not an option at that time. There were some, the Egyptians had picked up and were doing some burial prep things, some embalming and so forth. But that had not translated into what Abraham was able to do. I think they did, so they were able to maybe do some particular spices and things like that that might help preserve a little bit. Tony? Yeah, that is a thought that, why did they not cremate them I know that was at least in later on, that was kind of among some of the other nations, that was kind of a big deal. I think the Greeks were a big one, big proponent of that for sure, and surely some of the others were. It may be. It may be. Mhm. There's no doubt that a lot of that had to do with the customs of the time. Um, yeah, it was. It absolutely was. um, Abraham starts out with this by saying to them, I'm a I'm a foreigner and a visitor among you. He doesn't, he he speaks to them in a very humble manner, doesn't he? And you know, can you can you see that with Abraham kind of throughout his life? The kind of the level of humility that Abraham would uh, would display. Yeah, I think we can. I think we can. He took nothing for granted. Um, he was not presumptuous in any way. And then that's when they come to him and say, "Hey, you're a mighty prince among us. You just kind of you pick the best spot. You do what you need to do. It's all good." So then is when Abraham said, "No, I want a specific spot." And I think we can see here where he wants to have a place for not only his wife, but for him later, and as we read later, his descendants as well. Because what we're going to read is that there'll be a number of people who will be buried in this same cave, and that's kind of a big deal for them. Now we get down to the part here where he says, "Hey, talk to Ephron, the son of Zohar, for me, and ask him if he'll give me that cave of Machpelah." Now it looks like he's only asking for the cave to start with, and so apparently Ephron was in there where he would hear what was going on, the conversation. Um, and Abraham had offered to pay the full price for it. He was not asking for something for nothing. He was not asking for anybody to donate it to him. What does Ephron say with regards to that? With regards to, I want this cave. I'll pay the full price for it. Yeah, it was like, I'll give you the cave, I'll give you the fields, I'll give you all the stuff. I'll give it to you. You don't have to pay me anything. I'll give it to you. Now, one of the things that we see is in this society, this Hittite society, in early Canaan. Let's see. Let me find my spot right here. One of the things, we know that Hittite law possibly kind of pushed how this negotiation might have went. But one of the things that was brought out is during that time there were certain, let's see, let me find my spot. There were certain feudal services that the owners of property had to perform. They may be things like paying taxes. They may be things like providing your people and men in your entourages for military service if there's an attack. So it was there. There could be some things here too of where maybe Ephron was wanting to limit his tax liability a little bit too. Could be. That's not a. I mean, there's nothing in the scripture that indicates that, but through studying some of the society, then that's kind of the thoughts that might be some possibilities. It's also well, let me back up. Wait a minute with that. So Abraham insisted, though, that he wanted to pay for that. Now, why would he insist so to pay for that, you think, instead of accepting that free gift? Okay, that's a real good point. That is a real good point. Right. So, do you remember at the beginning of Exodus what is said there regarding Joseph? And what I'm looking for specifically is that where the writer here says that a king arose who knew not Joseph. And at that time, the Israelites were in the land of Goshen. That's where they had settled at the behest of Pharaoh. But then the Bible says that a king arose that knew not Pharaoh, and of course proceeded very quickly to put them into slavery. Now I said that to say this might have been fine between Abraham and Ephron, but what was going to happen 2 or 3 generations from now? Yeah, that was during the time of Moses. So what was going to happen 2 or 3 generations from now when these two were dead and gone? We don't know nothing about all that. This has been in our family line for all these years. This is ours. We're taking it back. So this is going to go back to potentially, because we don't really know a lot about Hittite law, but it's going to potentially go back to maybe how some of the laws were written as far as how real estate transactions took place and so forth. So Abraham, I think Abraham was a very shrewd businessman too. And he knew what may come up later on. So he knew that the best way for him to preserve something for posterity, for his descendants, is to buy it and then have the deed to it. And that's Lou. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. And I think that may have very well been the point that Abraham was thinking about. then was to let's secure this so that we've got it from now on. We don't have to worry about it. So, good point, Luke. So now we get down to the. All right. So now we get down to the dickering phase now. Now, some people absolutely just live for that, don't they? Some of us, tell me what you want, and I'll tell you whether I'm going to buy it or not. Well, now, Abraham, bless his heart, he didn't have a lot of time here. He had a deceased wife that he needed to bury, because he didn't have the funeral home to embalm her. So, or refrigeration. So we needed to move kind of rapidly. But here's the thing. Abraham told him straight up, I'll pay you the full price. So Ephron, he is still, whether he is just being that gracious or whether there may be some ulterior, I don't know. But we can look at it and see that he was gracious. We can see that easy enough. He's like, no, look, this is worth 400 shekels. What's that between us? And I think part of that too was the fact that Ephron was probably a very wealthy individual as well. He recognized Abraham as being very wealthy. Abraham had been very blessed. So he's like, as rich as we are, what's this little bit of something? But Abraham continued. He said, I want to know the price of this. So he told him, he said, okay, it's worth 400 shekels. Does anybody know how much 400 shekels was worth? Neither do I. It was, and the reason I say it that way is we really don't have an account of what the money was worth, particularly right there at that point. It was different. The different societies had a vastly different what money was worth. So it was 400 shekels. We know that for a fact. We don't really know, Steve. Now that we do get, and I saw that in my commentary, that they felt like that he overcharged him. That Ephron overcharged Abraham for that, and that's one thing. One of the reasons I say maybe his motives were not as pure as they might look like to start with. Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah, Ephron knew what he was doing too. But here's the thing that I think about that. Ephron may have taken advantage of Abraham at this point, and perhaps Abraham let him. But who was God with? God was with Abraham. And at some point in time, later on, what's going to happen to all these Hittites and these Canaanites and all these people? They're going to go bye-bye. So you're exactly right with that. So yeah, just, you can cut up if you want to, but God knows all that. He's going to take care of it. So what did Abraham do then at this point whenever Ephron told him what it was worth. Did Abraham try to dicker with him and bring it down? Like, no, he did. He counted out the 400 shekels, and that became Abraham's property. And they went on with it. Perhaps Ephron said, I got him. Perhaps here's another thought too. How many times have somebody wanted to buy something from you, but you really didn't want to sell it? So you give them this high exuberant number, hoping that that'll run them off, and they won't buy it. Maybe that's something he was thinking about. But Abraham went and bought it anyhow. I don't know. We don't know all those things. We can speculate from now till the end of time. But it's not really important. What's important is that God had blessed Abraham, and Abraham was able to buy this, to be able to bury his wife in this fashion. Now, would there be a difference in this type of burial as opposed to like we do now? Dig a hole and put them in it and cover it up? Yes, there were. Would it have been easy for Abraham just to have done it that way? Just dig a hole, wrap her up, put her in it, cover it up, put some stones over it, all that? Yeah. Yes, he was. No, I mean, he would. But I think the point I'm wanting to make here with that is that Abraham wanted a place for a memorial. Steve? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It does. You're right. Um, he was he was told to go there. That's the place he was shown, and by burying his beloved wife there, that shows that he showed God he's there. He is there. That's their home now. That's their place. Even though he told them, he was very, very humble when he told them, I'm just a stranger and a sojourner here in your land. This was the land that God was giving to him and his descendants. So, what do we see, speaking of memorials, what are some other memorials that we see later on? Okay, all right. Before we get to that, and that's a good point, another memorial we see is the Passover, isn't it? That is a time of remembering. It's a time of worship. And that's practiced right on up. And then we see where Jesus was buried in a cave. It was a brand new tomb, by the way. Nobody had ever been buried in that tomb. But he borrowed it. So I think it's appropriate for us to, give credence to this, where Abraham wanted to have one, a memorial for his beloved wife. He also wanted to have a place where he could be buried, where his son Isaac and his wife could be buried, and their descendants as well. What was at the end of Genesis? What was Joseph's charge to those people? Yep, there will be a time when you will leave this land, take my bones with you, and bury me in the land of my fathers, which would be, we can take that as in that cave that Joseph would be there as well. So, yes. Yep, and he would be at that time too. The Egyptians had a very elaborate process for embalming to preserve the body, to make the mummies, and where there would be something 400 years later that they could carry with them to bury. Now, one of the last things we see here is that in verse 20 it says, "So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded to Abraham by the sons of Heth as property for a burial place." So he got his deed; it's his from now on. As far as we know, I think that's probably about the only actual property he owned. He was just kind of a sojourner the rest of the time. He had all these flocks and herds and so forth that he moved around from place to place as the grazing would hold up. But he actually bought this property and got a deed for it, and then that protected him and his descendants from then on. That it was recorded that it belonged to Abraham, the mighty prince. That no one else owned it. No one else could take it back. Couldn't renege on the contract. It was signed and sealed. Yeah. I think they probably did. I think so. I think that was probably one of those things that was carried through posterity, so that they would know. I mean, they had to know where to bury Joseph or where to put his bones. So I think probably they did. All right, we got just a few minutes left. Let's go through some of these questions and see kind of what we are at. How old was Sarah when she died? 127. Compared to Abraham, she was pretty young, wasn't she? What is another name for Kirjath Barba? Hebron. The children of Heth said of Abraham, "You are a mighty blank among us." Mighty prince. How did Abraham think of himself among the people of Heth? Okay. All right. Number 5. Which of the following things did the children of Heth not want to do when Abraham asked for a burying place for Sarah. Which one of those y'all think did they not want to do? Who? What? B. They did not want to drive him out of their country. Number 6, the land which Abraham wanted actually belonged to which of the following? Who did it belong to? B? Y'all say B? Ephron the Hittite. Which of the following did Abraham not want to do? B, accept a burying place without paying for it. What was the name of the place Abraham bought for the burying place? Machpelah. How much did Abraham pay for the burying place? 400 shekels of what? Silver. 400 shekels of silver. The cave of Machpelah is said to be before what? Mamre. All right. True or false? Hebron is in the land of Canaan. True. Ephron is called the son of Zohar. True. Abraham complained about the price of the land he purchased. He did not. The land purchased included some trees and a cave. True. According to this chapter, the cave was filled with water. Don't see anything about that. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Next week, we'll be on chapter 24. And we're going to see that the hint for next week is that romance is in the air. So, thank y'all for being here today. We'll pick up chapter 24 next week. Thank y'all.